Memories are playing out in the garden from the earliest age, hitting a ball that was hanging off a tennis ball that was hanging off the tree with a cricket bat, probably before I could walk. And I think it was just sport was always there. Yeah, as you said, Dad was a Royal Marine, so that naturally meant we moved around quite a lot. But there always seemed to be families living close by, and as a group of kids, we just go out and chuck a ball around, rugby, cricket, whatever it is. Parents were always so supportive, never overbearing, never pushy or anything like that. And I think it helps that one of them would always be pretty keen to come and throw me a ball or have me sort of kicking balls. And if I did break the odd greenhouse or the old house window, it wasn't frowned on too much. And Dad had 32 years in the Royal Marines and Special Forces. And
today's guest on the podcast, Will Webster, is like you and I in a lot of ways. He's a sports fan. He's played a lot of sports. He played semi-professional rugby. He also, from a young age, had a knack for coaching, which led him to, at a young age, coaching at the highest level. He coached the Kenya National team in the HSBC World Series and to the 2018 Commonwealth Games. He now coaches head coaches, helping them through their challenges across 6 different sports. So if you're a coach, you're going to get so much great information out of this. The importance of trust and humility in your coaching. He's going to give you some strategies on how you're going to be able to bring that into your coaching and into your life. And I also want you to keep an eye out and an ear out for some of the things that I talk a lot about on this podcast and how he incorporates that into his coaching as well. I'm Ian Hawkins, and this is Sporty Is Life. The purpose of sport, as I see it, is to see your vision become a reality. Find your voice, create strong connections, and learn to trust your body. Okay, Will, how are you going?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well. Thank you very much for having me on, and looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, good man. Thanks for coming on. We've got a lot in common in the work that we do, and we'll get further into that as we go. I want to start by your own sporting journey. You've grown up with, like, sounds like a sport mad parents. Your dad really keen. What was it, cricket and hockey played, was it?
Yeah.
Your mum playing at a national level in a couple of sports as well. Also fascinated by your dad being a Marine and maybe the impact that would have had in a positive and maybe not so positive in your sporting journey as well. So tell us a little bit about your young sporting journey. Like, what did you grow up playing and what your aspirations, given you did have high-performing parents?
Yeah, I suppose, like anyone, the way you're brought up and the hobbies of your parents have a big impact on what you do. So, no, memories are playing out in the garden from the earliest age, hitting a ball that was hanging off a tennis ball that's hanging off a tree with a cricket bat, probably before I could walk. And I think it was just sport was always there. Yeah, as you said, Dad was a Royal Marine, so that naturally meant we moved around quite a lot. But there always seemed to be families living close by, and as a group of kids, we just go out and chuck a ball around, rugby, cricket, whatever it is. Parents were always so supportive, never overbearing, never pushy or anything like that. And I think it helps that one of them would always be pretty keen to come and throw me a ball or have me sort of kicking balls. And if I did break the odd greenhouse or the old house window, it wasn't frowned on too much. And Dad had 32 years in the Royal Marines and Special Forces and did a lot in his career. And when you asked the question there, I don't think there were any negatives really. He was obviously gone for a while, but I think as a busy kid, you sort of don't notice that he's gone. Perhaps you're just getting on with your things. So no, 2 unbelievable role models. It was joining the military was something I considered for a long time, and I think now it's something I'm still really interested in. I think there's obviously a lot of ties with with sport and the high performance side of it and the leadership. So it's something I'm still really interested in and enjoy picking his brains about.
Yeah, I guess my mind went to that like really hard taskmaster and disciplinarian, and I don't know if you've heard Shaq's story when he talked about like him sort of not necessarily heading in the right direction in his first couple of years at college, and his dad pulling him into line in no uncertain terms. So that was where mine went.
Yeah.
But yeah, glad to hear that it was only positive. So did you tend to be like pretty naturally gifted with that sort of pedigree in your sporting background?
No, I didn't. No, I definitely wasn't. I was someone who, yeah, I played all sports, but was always someone who, I think the work ethic was always there. Probably based on having, parents who worked very hard in their own careers and sort of understood and pushed us that way, without looking at the end product or performance. It was all just enjoy it, work really hard, get better. But no, I'd like to have been a little bit more naturally talented. I might still be playing if that was the case, but I suppose, yeah, I loved it, and I think from an early age, I was always someone who think deeply about the game and the tactical side of things, and trying to understand the game a little bit better, whichever sport it was I was playing. And there were probably early signs that I was going to be better suited to coaching just through that, I think. But no, I'd have enjoyed getting a few more of the talented genes. I think I've got twin sisters, and I think both of those probably picked up the majority.
That's not fair. It's funny you mentioned that about more drawn to coaching. That's like the good coaches. That tends to be the story that's told is, yeah, well, I just had a natural inclination towards it. So were you like even coaching younger teams when you were still quite young?
Yeah, I started coaching when I was 16. At school, we had a sort of once a week program where you had opportunities to go do is either CCF, join the army, join the Royal Marines, which I did for 3 years. But then age 16, yeah, I think I was probably already quite aware there that that's what I wanted to do, and so I was coaching from 16. But then even within my own teams, whether it would be in rugby, and your sort of the coach gives you a bit of control around the line out, and you're coming up with all the line out moves, and probably going far too deep into that, and your mates are thinking have a day off. And but it was always just something I sort of really enjoyed doing. Loved the thinking aspect behind it. And then that just continued through. So left school and carried on playing, but was always coaching. And have loved it ever since. I don't think that natural love and enthusiasm has ever really disappeared. It's just evolved, and obviously move on to sort of performance sport, and results matter a little bit more, but still the same enjoyment sort of has remained throughout.
Yeah, and you mentioned that already about the messages you got from your parents about making sure you're having fun, but you're still looking to do your best, and that sort of shines through how you describe that as well. I did a couple of episodes recently talking about the positive aspects of men sitting down and watching sport, because we all watch through our different lens. Obviously, some go deeper than others. I'm curious to hear more about you watching sport, because for me, I've always watched from that perspective of my natural inclination, which is around how the players are connecting and how they're getting along, and how that's impacting performance. It's by the sound of what you're saying, you're more data and analytical side of it. Is that about right? And do you still watch the game through that lens?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think so, but probably not the sort of data and analytics. I think more sports psychology is something that I love, and especially from a coaching point of view. I was doing some work with a cricket coach over the weekend, so I had a day at Lords, and sort of in between seeing him, I was sat watching a game of cricket that, must admit, was a really boring, tedious game with a very slow run rate. But I was sat there thinking, how I suppose just how you could be better, where metrics might be able to go. How can you measure self-regulation in batsmen? How do you bring what is a very individual team, or I suppose a collection of individual contests together as a team? And I rarely watch a game where it's just pure enjoyment. I can have a beer watching a game and with mates and things, but I suppose I'm always just thinking about, probably from a coach's point of view, what will they be thinking here? How could they? I love watching football managers running up and down the touchline and going, I wonder what the impact of that is. I think once you've coached and you enjoy it, I think you probably always see it slightly through a coach's lens. I don't often see it through a player's lens anymore. I think that's long gone, but certainly through a coach's lens.
Love it. Yeah, that is a good thought. The impact of the body language of all the individual coaches. I know one of the teams here in the NRL, they're big on not showing they're tired, always having that positive, upbeat and looking body language, even when they are completely knackered, and what an impact that has. So, yeah, that is interesting. So, what have you learned about those coaches that are screaming and look frantic, and are you seeing that there is a correlation between that and performance?
I think there is. I definitely think there is. I think that the evidence shows that obviously if your heart rate's up at 120, 130, then naturally your ability to make really informed, good decisions at the time, and also your ability to notice and your perspective on the game and outlook and seeing space and things all goes down. I'm aware there's other parts to it. Certainly in French rugby, for example, it's something they have to do to show their passion, and I think that probably is similar in some of the European football as well. But I think ultimately, for me, it's trying to get a coach who's able to make really good decisions at that time, and a lot of that is heartbeat, emotional regulation, being able to identify when they're sort of losing themselves a little bit, and how they regulate themselves back down and just center themselves within the game. Because for me, your ability on game day is vital. You're making tactical substitutions at the correct time. You're being able to read the game. You're being able to notice tactically what the other team are trying to do, and being distracted and allowing yourself to lose that emotional regulation just inhibits that.
Yeah, spot on. What I should have mentioned before you dive too far into this is that most of the work that you're doing now is coaching high performance coaches. So this is not just purely an interest in how you watch the game. This is actually your profession. So you've got a deeper understanding than the average person, right?
I try to. That's what I'm doing now, and that's an element of it. I think it's part of your coaching craft, actually, the amount of coaches that probably think they make a positive impact on game day, but actually, either through, like you said, body language, the language, the communication, the sort of almost overbearing nature of trying to help becomes a negative. So some of the really interesting time I've spent is actually watching coaches on game day, either in a coaching box or on the touchline, particularly with sports like basketball, where you're so close to the touchline, where you're so visible. I think just being aware enough to see how others might perceive you, and the positive or negative side of that. And I don't think there's right or wrong, but it's probably just trying to make coaches aware of the impacts of both, and also being able to pick and choose how they are in certain moments as well. Takes practice, takes different techniques and methods, whether that's breathing or whether that's just having a mantra just to recenter themselves when they understand that they're getting a little bit overbearing.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to ask you more about emotional regulation. I imagine a lot of coaches, it really depends on their personality type, how they're going to be at their best and how they're going to get the best out of their players. But that ability to emotionally regulate is going to be an absolute vital part of them being able to deliver the message, and like you said, keeping their heart rate down. So what are some of the things that you do yourself? Because I imagine you've got to be the calmest person in the room almost if everything sort of goes to chaos around you. And what are some of those strategies that you help the coaches with around that emotional regulation? Because I think for the listeners, no matter what field they're in, whether that's sport or in their high performance in business, they're going to need that same tool, right?
Yeah, I think so. For me, it wasn't when I was coaching team sports, it was something that I think naturally I was someone who under tension just went very quiet and very inside myself, and really had to find something that I was focused on. Otherwise, I would struggle to focus on anything. So my direction came from going, right, I need to look at this aspect of the game, and I'm going to put all my focus on that. And that through practice, I became better and better at that, and then was able to obviously offer that tactical insight, whether it's at half time or getting messages down. I think with coaches in general, of course, it's a massively authentic piece as well. Some coaches have the ability to really bring teams together and bring players together through their emotion. But I think again there has to be some sort of gauge on that as well. So different tactics. I think again having a bit of a mantra where you feel yourself losing control or emotional control, just being able to utter a couple of words towards yourself. The example I give actually is a player, Joss Butler, who's a cricketer. Yeah. He wrote "F it" on the top of his bat, and that was his way of just every time, between balls, just looking at the top of his bat, seeing those two words and going, sweet, that's got me back down to a really good level. I think again, having really thought out processes helps as well. So for example, half time blows, do you go straight into the changing room all fired up and immediately go and start sort of speaking to players? And again, rather than bringing down that, I suppose, collective heart rate and bringing down that emotional regulation just by going in and big and aggressive in nature and body language, well, actually all you're doing there is bringing it back up. And I believe half time's a particularly precious moment where actually there's a lot of emotions that if they're not dealt with properly, you can send players into quite high anxiety moments. So the work I do with coaches is around those processes. Okay, first 2 minutes, it's actually just checking in with either someone who's sat up in the stands watching from afar. It might be a manager or a general manager. It might be checking in with your coaches. It might just be going straight over and speaking to the captain, but really making sure you're firstly aligned with everyone. You've got really clear messaging that you're wanting to deliver. And it's, again, could be in the coach's box rather than being on the microphone every other minute. Actually, it's going, right, I'm just going to hold my thoughts for a couple of minutes before speaking down the microphone, because waiting those 2 minutes, actually, that message isn't helpful. I'm just commentating on the game. I'm not offering tactical insight that's going to make it better. So, no, we would have a look at processes. We'd have a look at firstly understanding how this will help, and then just another really useful thing is filming yourself in those moments. So actually getting the analyst to set up a camera of you in the coaching box and watching it back afterwards can be quite enlightening and quite scary. But I think it's all about just understanding, am I helping or am I hindering here?
Yeah, and I imagine that players need that time to calm down in those couple of minutes as well, because they're going to be pretty highly strung and emotional when they first come off the field. Interesting.
On that, mate, I think there's been studies done where actually there's actually been quite a high degree of PTSD moments that have sprung from halftime changing rooms. For players to be, again, when your emotion is so high, which naturally it is coming off, you're fatigued, your heart rate's at 170, 180, being called out in that moment, or having some negative behavior and negative communication that comes across from a coach actually lasts and actually is quite a scarring moment. And the last team I worked with, I spoke to players away from the change room, but just asking of their experiences since they started playing, and the moments they remembered were all the negative ones. They couldn't really tell me about a team talk that had been helped them or had been really positive. They were all just going, I remember this one time where coach lost it and tables were flipped or someone got chewed out. And I think it's just understanding that the player anxiety is at a hugely high level at that moment. So just making sure that we're aware of that, and we're aware of, actually, is what we're saying all emotional, or are there some really good tactical and technical insights being put across that then put the team in a position to change game plans or change playing styles in the second half to a positive result?
Yeah, fascinating space. It's funny you talk about those negative experiences. That's often those football podcasts that I listen to. The Under the Cosh is one that comes to mind. They often get ex-footballers in, and they're talking about good moments. But with the managers, it's often those stories of where things went wrong and the managers reacted in a not such a positive way. And it's entertaining looking back, but I imagine it's a therapeutic process for the person being able to talk about it, because I'd never really thought about it being that impactful of PTSD, but it makes sense when I think of every other area where that would happen.
Yeah, and I was Eddie Jones was interviewed in one of the Six Nations games, and he'd been speaking to an NBA coach who said now that they go in at half time, and actually the first 2 minutes players are allowed on their phones, and they give them those 2 minutes just to go, right, scroll through your phone, get it out your system, see what's being said, see what's being written about. Which at the time I was thinking, wow, that's far out.
Madness.
But actually, yeah, but I suppose it does make sense, because now there's anxiety attached to not having your phone in general. Like, we're so used to having our phone. When it's sat next to us, it's actually quite hard to not pick it up and just look. And I suppose then if you're left wondering for the whole second half what's being said about you, it's not going to be good for your confidence. It's not going to be good for your just ability to focus on the game. So I suppose the thinking behind that is, well, look, have a look at it, see what's being written, get it over with. You know what it is, and now go back out and really focus on the game. Which, again, I don't know how much I'm not sure whether I'm a big fan of it, but it does make sense.
Yeah, I'm curious though, because I'd love to find out more about the data of that team. I don't know if you follow Drew Broughton on LinkedIn, and he talks a lot
Yeah,
about facing the fear and how important he's often challenging people on some of those not even old school, some of the new like sports psychology methods, and he talks about that facing the fear and how important that is and going into the darkness. So I guess that aligns to that piece, is rather than wondering and letting that fear of not knowing dominate, just stare it down and get it out of your system, and then you still got a job to do. And I'm interested to read more there. My mind, you mentioned you do watch rugby league, and you've seen enough of NRL to know the landscape. Have you seen the vision of Craig Bellamy in the box, the Melbourne Storm coach, going absolutely ballistic? Yeah. So I had one of his former players on, actually a couple of them, and one of them talked about how every single game he played for Craig Bellamy, he got goosebumps before the game, talking about the stories he would tell or whatever it was that inspired him. So it's obvious with his success that you can have both of that, but maybe that reaction in the box allows him to come back into the group and be able to deliver in a more measured and more emotionally regulated space. I'd be fascinated to hear your thoughts on how that would unfold.
Yeah, well, I think you look at his coaching record and you kind of go, well, to be fair, it's
It
working,
works.
isn't it? I think that probably the overarching point is your emotion, and I think it's different if you're in a coach's box rather than you're on the sideline. But I think we're all emotional. We all live and breathe every moment on the rugby pitch or the
Yeah.
whatever pitch it is. I think it's understanding the impact that your behaviour can have on performance. So I'd imagine when Craig Bellamy's in those moments where he's losing it, someone's probably reaching for the radio and just moving it far enough away out of his reach, because that's not going to be the optimal time to send a message down. So I think it's just understanding, right, I'm out of control. And again, another example would be I've been in a coaching box where actually the head coach, who's probably more like Craig Bellamy, very emotional, very almost commentary as the game unfolds. Well, he's been aware enough to go, I'm not going to have a radio. I'm going to give it to an assistant coach, and he is going to filter my messages down onto the pitch, because that's far clearer, far more clarity in terms of messaging, but also he's got the ownership and the accountability to say, actually, you know what, I'm not going to deliver that message just as you've said it. I'm just going to make it a little bit more helpful and a little bit more objective than what you've just given me. So Craig Bellamy's a phenomenal coach and someone I love watching and hearing and speaking. But it's certainly an emotional guy as well, which, like you said, is a strength.
Absolutely. I'm pretty sure he does the same. He's got his assistant there that he yells, he screams at to tell them to deliver the message. And I'm sure they definitely chill the message out a bit, shall we say. Yeah, that's good. We kind of got a bit sidetracked from your career. You mentioned before how you would have liked to have had more ability. Did you have aspirations to play at a high level, even though you said that you weren't necessarily the most gifted athlete?
Yeah, I certainly did. Massive aspirations or dreams, and like I said, I suppose with a lack of natural talent, I played in the back row in rugby, and I'm not the biggest, certainly not the quickest. Body let me down a fair few times, but I think, and I've spoken about it before, probably finishing playing age 23, I'd had a couple of years of just back-to-back injuries, nothing career-ending, nothing major, but enough for me just to question whether this was what I wanted to be doing. And I probably saw the light or the direction that my playing career was having, and thought, you know what, I want to coach now. And looking back, I finished playing, got straight into coaching, and I was just in a mad rush. I wanted to achieve everything that I hadn't achieved as a player within the first year of coaching. And I think it's probably a common thread between a lot of young coaches. And I think I look back at it with a little bit of regret. It certainly it got me that obsession with coaching and obsession with pushing on to the next thing and learning everything I could as quickly as I could, got me into professional sport or professional coaching and into sort of elite coaching quickly, but at the expense of, I didn't slow down. I probably didn't enjoy it. I did have my identity wrapped up in my coaching and in the results, which I regret from a personal point of view, but I also feel that it's given me a platform now to offer a little bit of an insight to other coaches who are perhaps going down the same path. I think we're extremely lucky to coach. You have to enjoy it. You need to enjoy the view as you go, but also it's probably more around the reflective part, actually stopping, taking a moment, learn, reflect. I feel that early in my career, I was probably making a lot of the same mistakes because I was just go, next thing, what's next? Through a lack of talent, got me into the coaching, and then that was just the early part of my coaching career, I suppose.
I love what you said there about identity and being wrapped up in being the coach, and
and also around results, because I think that's definitely something people would relate to in their career. Like people say, who are you? They often rattle off a career thing and a family thing, or maybe they don't even go to the family thing. That's often a career thing. And we definitely naturally as humans then pin that part of our identity around the results we get as well. So that makes sense. You mentioned that, helping some of those coaches on maybe some of those things that, you learned over the years. From what I've seen, often it's the player that didn't necessarily reach those heights is often better at being able to demonstrate what's required to be able to hit that, because they know the obstacles and they know what they needed to know and they know what they need to learn. Whereas the ones that are just gifted, they just do it. They don't know how to explain it because it's kind of always been there. Do you feel like some of your limitations as a player has definitely helped you as a coach?
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think probably the biggest example of that was, we all suffer from imposter syndrome. And I was 23 when I first started coaching the Kenya Sevens. And at the time they had some of the greatest Sevens players that have probably played the game, who were all 8, 9, 10 years older than me. And I think going in, it was a real quick lesson of going, geez, I can't claim to be a genius in sevens here, because you guys have got 50, 70, 90 tournaments at the top level. So I think that certainly helped. But naturally, I'm a really curious coach. So I think across my coaching career and now working with coaches, I think I've visited something like 120 different elite sports teams and spoken to coaches and met coaches, interviewed them, picked their brains, and that's helped me, because that's given me a really broad perspective of actually not just what top level rugby teams do, but what do the best basketball teams do? What some of the best research at Harvard coming out with in terms of teaching innovation? What is the NRL doing? What are the Sydney Swans doing in AFL? What's the how? And it's not there. Very little of that's tactical and technical. It's probably around the messaging. It's probably around how do they communicate with their players? How do they construct their culture? How do the coaching teams align with each other? How do they review practices? How do they get messages across having lost games? So I think that really helped. Perhaps if I'd achieved great things as a player, you probably take a little bit longer to get out of that bubble, because you think you've achieved it as a player, and you think there's probably a bit of a copy and paste from playing into coaching.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's definitely helped. But then again, there are some brilliant coaches who've reached great heights in the game, and a couple that I'm working with now that are really good, and probably as a result of having some really good coaches themselves who understand the people aspect of it. There's obviously elements of their craft there that take time. Standing in front of a group of players and delivering messages and articulating messages and breaking it down into really simplistic points. That takes time, and that's something you've got to work on. And I was fortunate enough to spend 6 years teaching English literature in a classroom to sort of 11, 12-year-olds. So that gave me that experience of actually standing in front and trying to make things enjoyable. And often with English literature, it's not always everyone's favorite subject. So you fail, you learn, you reflect, and you do all of that. And I think you eventually get a better perspective on how to run those meetings and how to communicate with players.
Yeah, great point. I want to come back to that, what you talked about there, and the focus being, this is not necessarily on the performance stuff, but some of those other things that are the sort of the key differences that a lot of them, the best ones, do differently. You mentioned there about coaching at a young age against these older people. You talked about teaching. I remember I did my teaching degree in PE, and those first pracs when I only just finished school myself, like that was terrifying, because I just didn't feel like I was old enough to be teaching these. They were like peers, right? And I found that really daunting at that age. What sort of like, how was that experience for you? I mean, you mentioned that, okay, well, you had to look at it differently, but when you originally got put into that role, was there a fair bit of fear that you had to face around how are you going to manage those older players and egos to a certain degree?
Yeah, there was. Yeah, like I said, I think I was battling with imposter syndrome for. Yeah, I don't know whether you ever get out of it, but you understand it better and you understand how to manage that feeling. But no, there certainly was early days. But I think it's going back to, well, what is coaching? Coaching's, for me, it's taking players to, or taking a team to somewhere they don't think they can go themselves, having big aspirations, and then it's about simplifying the game. Or for now, working with coaches, it's going right. Well, what's your biggest goal? What's your biggest dream that you want to achieve? I'll help you get there, and then it's around plotting how you get there. What do we need to achieve? What do we need to get better at in terms to do this? So I think going back to coaching rugby, it was I quickly realized that I wasn't going to try and have the magic bullet. I didn't have it, and I wasn't going to try and claim that I had it. But what I could do with those players was break down their game, find perhaps blind spots, areas that they wanted to improve, and then spend a lot of time coming up with ways that we could do that. And the part of coaching that I love is being with people and getting to know people, building relationships. And I think that's common with most coaches. So that was something that I think was probably invaluable. It was something that I did naturally anyway, but wasn't something that I thought would get me 2-3 steps down the line. Actually, okay, well, look, we've built this level of trust now. You trust me, I trust you. That's a foundation for any coaching relationship, whether that's player coach or coach and coach. So I think, again, my lessons from that time was, don't try and achieve everything in a week. But the human side of coaching is far more than the actual rugby side or the sports side or the technical, tactical side. It's building those relationships, getting to know them as people, getting that trust built, because then then you can have far more impact in your actual coaching.
Yeah, great answer. I was thinking, okay, well, how did you gain a level of respect if they knew your age and your background? And it sounds like you went for, well, I'm going to build trust first. But was there something else that you maybe tried, or a part of your approach where you suddenly realised that, oh, actually they are respecting me here? Like, was there a moment or a sort of period of time where you realised that, okay, they're on board with me here, I'm heading in the right direction?
Yeah, I think it is carving out that time to get to know them as people, and understanding that even the best players in the world have insecurities, have areas that they want to improve, and that's probably what makes them the best players in the world, because they're not happy with sitting where they are. But I suppose, and it might not have been a light bulb moment, it might have been it was a couple of failures where actually you think you have to know the answer to everything. But for me, it's the humility and the self-awareness to go, you know what, let's try this. I'm not sure whether it's going to work, but I think it's worth trying. And if we fail, no issue. And I think that's something that I see a lot of coaches do. And I think the weight that it has is really undervalued. Just going, you know what, guys, let's try this. Let's give it a go. Let's see where it gets us. Let's learn together. And then probably the last aspect of that is, I think I built a lot of trust with them because they saw how hard I'd work. So it was, whether that was session design or trying to get better as a coach myself, speaking to coaches around the world, different sport, going to visit different teams, constantly wanting to get better myself. I think that sends a message that this is the way we do things. We're constantly looking for any edge we can get. We'll try things. We won't be afraid of failing. We'll learn quickly. We'll reflect together. And with that, we'll eventually get to where we want to get to, and a method that suits us.
Yeah, I love it. You've used that word humility a few times, and it's funny because as I was listening to you talk and you were describing certain things, I got a sense of an air of humility about you as well. Is that something that you think has come from your parents, that they've always instilled in you, or is it just something that you've stumbled into naturally?
Um, yeah, probably. Well, looking at my parents, I think definitely. Yeah, they were both people who just set a great, great role models. Like I said earlier, achieved really good things, but just worked hard. Were very people first. And I think humility is key in sport, and I think humility is key in coaching. Um, it's I don't know whether it's something that I try to do. I think it's probably something that hopefully I am, and hopefully I'll come across as humble. But like I said, I think it probably also stems from not achieving great things as a player, because certainly you feel like I certainly feel like I've always got that extra step to go when going into a team, because I haven't got that credibility as a player. As a young coach, it was something that I was really mindful of. Now, as I'm a bit older and I'm 15 years into my coaching career, it's something I'm less worried about, because I think I've built enough credibility as a coach.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't know whether it's humility or curiosity. I just want to get better. I want to help others get better, and there's sort of nothing that I won't do really to seek out where I can find those advantages, and speaking to different people certainly helps with that.
I think even the way you answered that was a very humble response. So I think it sounds like it's probably pretty hardwired. I was going to ask you about empathy, which in a lot of ways sort of goes hand in hand with humility. Again, just from a brief conversation, you sound like someone that's got a really good grasp on empathy, probably more a natural way of you showing up. Would you agree with that? And also, I'd be curious to know how important that is when you are coaching coaches to instill that emotional intelligence and that ability to have empathy for not just for their players, but everyone in the organisation.
Yeah, I think it's a key ingredient to coaching. You have to be empathy, but at the same time, I think you've got to be ruthlessly honest as well. And for me, that is being empathetic, because I think there's been times where, as a younger coach, I'd probably beat around the bush with feedback, and I wouldn't be brutally honest. And now one of the areas that comes up with any coach I'm working with is difficult conversations, and selection conversations, or telling someone they're not being re-signed, or an assistant coach is being let go. I think how you do that, you can always be empathetic. But for me, it's just, as a player, I remember having some of the best times of my life playing. And I also remember having some really challenging times. And often that was due to coaches who I didn't connect with. And for me, they didn't treat me the way that I would want to be treated as a player. And I think that's something that I always take now. You're a truth teller. You've got to be really honest, but there's an empathetic way of doing that. And there's an authenticity around that as well. But I do think it's a key ingredient to coaching successful teams. I think there's always an element of empathy there. And, whether that's looking after the family, whether that's actually just be able to sit down with a player and connecting them away from rugby or away from sport, I think that needs to come first, because you build that trust and you treat them with empathy and you care for them. Then the sport and the performance side should follow.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, a lot of the conversations on this podcast is the things that map across from sport to other areas of life and back again. That's true in every walk of life, like being able to have that level of empathy and building trust, as you said. Again, another word that you've used a few times now, so I'm seeing some really great patterns here. You were talking before about something you just mentioned again then, is the percentage, or how much of the best teams develop a cultural aspect or a communication aspect, a connection aspect, which is what separates them. What sort of things have you learned from the 120 different organisations you've visited, like right around the world of sport? You've been to some incredible places. What are sort of some of the important things that people can take away and apply to their life or to their coaching, for that matter?
I think if I try and narrow it down, I think culture is a word that gets bandied around, and personally, I'm always a little bit skeptical of the word when teams talk about their culture and they talk about how good their culture is. I think the successful teams I've been a part of and seen, and the coaches that I work with, for me, it's values and it's behaviours, but it's reinforced constantly. It's not even something that I wouldn't be a fan of culture sessions. Your Friday afternoon is spent on your culture. I think it needs to be something that's there every single day in every action that you're a part of. Some cool things I've seen around that is the transition from it being a coach-led thing to a player-led thing. So I think when the players start talking about the values and the players start talking about the identity, I think that's when you're in a really good place, because it's almost seeped into every aspect of the team, and actually then the players are the ones upholding the whatever it is you want to live by, but they're the ones leading that and keeping each other accountable for that. I also feel vision's really important. Some of the teams that I've seen that perhaps don't have a vision, or perhaps it's not articulated. I think you can be the fastest runner in the world, but if you don't have a direction, you're never going to end up where you want to end up. So I think the really powerful environments I've seen are the ones where the vision is it gets the goosebumps on your body going. It's going, wow, that's bigger than just winning a championship. That's bigger than whatever it is, whether that's connecting with the community, whether that's whatever that might be. But your vision, I feel, should be the first thing you start with, and then you work back after that, and you sort of plot your route to it. So I think those would be two things. And then, look, you've got to have really good tactical understanding. You've got to have really good coaches that are constantly getting better. I think coaching teams that are different and have a bit of cognitive difference, and that they're not the same people. They think differently. There's a willingness to hear other thoughts and a willingness to put ideas out there. That would be also really important. And then the last one, I think, is just conflict and the way you deal with conflict. Again, I can remember back as a player and as a coach, there's elephants in the room, and they're left there to just linger, and they very quickly turn into very poisonous things. But I think, again, as a coach now, having the ability to identify them, see them before they get too big, your sort of passive aggressive behaviours, your unhappy players, if they're left there to linger, then they will just become toxic. But having the ability to sort of refocus, redirect where you go, and have those difficult conversations, and then get on with things, I think that's something that's stood out to me as well.
Yeah, spot on. And the things that you mentioned there, having that vision, the direction, the values, being able to deal with conflict, having that sense of purpose that you talked about, that give you goosebumps, that goes beyond just the winning and losing. They're all just great things that are going to be giving you high performance in any area of your life. I'm thinking about one of the particular business owners that I've worked with, and talked about, like, have the tough conversation that maybe that person's not the right fit for your team because they don't adhere to the high performance principles that you have for your business. It's your business. I guess it's much like a coach, right? Like, this is how we want it to be. Yes, everyone's going to have buy-in and everyone can have a voice, but ultimately it's got to fall somewhere. It's got to still land in the right place, and it comes from those key things. And I wonder, just on that, how much work you do when you're coaching a coach on what's going on in their everyday life that may be having an impact? Like, how often does that come into it? How much of a percent would that be part of the work you're doing?
It would be the starting point. It would be probably the ending point. It would be everything in between. Like, it's, for me, the way I work with coaches is it's around themselves. So it's mastering yourself, it's mastering your craft, all the skills, and then it's mastering your organization. But yourself, you can't do anything. If you don't understand yourself, you can't understand anything else that goes on in your environment. So I think it's making sure everything from, are they optimally positioned every single day to bring their best? Are they getting better? Are there things that are going on in the background, whether it be with time management, too much responsibility, where they're actually not able to spend time with their families, not able just to take a step back? Are they sleeping well? Are they doing everything they can to be a performer in their own context? So I think that's really important. And then I suppose the value that I add is, often I'm not from their sport. I'm not from the status quo of their sport. But with that, it means that I can pick apart things and see things that they perhaps can't with their blinkers on. So it's almost going, look, let's have a look at what's going on. Let's chat around things that are really important to you. There's loads of difficult conversations to have. I think most head coaches probably have thousands of interactions every single day. All of those are important. So it's trying to get them to understand that there's a lot that goes on, rather than just the doing. It's the preparation, it's the sleep, it's making sure that over the course of a season, they're making sure that they're almost constructing their own platform to succeed.
Yeah, so good. You've mentioned that you've visited, like you said, about 120 of these organisations to learn what you need to learn, what you wanted to learn, seeing things that you didn't even know you needed to learn. I'd be curious to hear the difference in setups and environments that you experienced. You've been in the US, you mentioned Kenya, Hong Kong, the UK. Like, what are some of those key differences between the different cultural backgrounds and nationalities?
Yeah, I think they're all very much, they're different versions of the same thing. The high performance environments all at face value look very similar, but then, like you said, there's differences within that. So I think culturally it'd be a lot around actually how direct you can be to people. So if I take the Kenyans, for example, and this is generalizing, but very quiet people, deep religious faith, often from very humble backgrounds. So actually, the way that you can deliver feedback to them is very different to perhaps a local person in Hong Kong, where status is far more important. There's a lot more of a hierarchy. Being called out in front of a group of their peers is frowned upon, and you can completely destroy your relationships with them. And then go to America, where you've got players who are from different sports, different sporting backgrounds. A lot of the guys are from college football and NFL backgrounds, and actually the way that they learn through playbooks is super different. So I think you're constantly looking at the small differences, but at the same time, as a coach, who you are in terms of your awareness, in terms of your empathy, in terms of your direction, in terms of your messaging, doesn't change. It's that's everything. And just then the small little ways that you can adapt those messages or adapt the way that you do things is vital.
Yeah, it's good. I like what you said there. It's like it's there's differences, but it's ultimately it's the same thing, just with the subtleties and how you deliver it. You mentioned those important elements. How much of that do you dedicate to your own life, making sure you've got your vision, your values in place, purpose, doing the conflicts like that? much time and energy to make yourself the best coach do you dedicate to those?
Yeah, a lot more than I would have done, 10, 15 years ago, because I think I'm just more aware now, and I'm more aware of, coaching is, sometimes you just got to put the laptop away. We all, early in my career, I thought it was watch as much game footage as I could, watch as many drills, spend time constructing session plans and game designs. But actually now I feel it's firstly yourself. How self-aware are you? How much time do you take to reflect? How rapid can you make your reflective cycles? Because I think now I see that as being a major competitive advantage. As coaches, you're very much doing the same sort of thing. You've got a different set of players, but your ability to learn quicker, your ability to speed up those learning cycles, and then your clarity and messaging is everything. So, now same sort of thing. I work with coaches, but I've got coaches that work with me, and it's constantly looking at better ways of doing things. Like I said, I'm really passionate about learning from other sports as well. So I've got a group of 60 coaches at the moment from 12 different sports, all head coaches, and they're part of the program that's working with. We've got 6 or 7 presenters coming on board from all different aspects of corporate innovation to actors around having difficult conversations and how you can practice that, to negotiation experts. That's the stuff I love. I think looking outside of sport, bringing coaches together, giving them a chance to just chat coaching and being a head coach, and the challenges that they face and the solutions that they found together is something that really interests me. So I think it's, to answer your question, I spend a lot more time on it now than I did, but it's taken me a bit of time for the penny to drop, and the realization that that's more important than perhaps your practice session that you're about to deliver.
I love that. I was just thinking about some of the coaches I work with, and then need to have that reminder. So I'll make sure I clip that part up for them, is like how much more important your self-awareness is, and working on yourself than going into more stuff on the laptop, which is, as you rightly point out, is often the default mechanism for so many of them. Will, really fascinating chat today. I just would love to give you the opportunity, if there's any other message that you'd love to share. I know we've only ever going to scratch the surface in an hour of just your knowledge, but is there anything else that you know is super important from a personal perspective, from a coaching perspective, that you'd love to share?
Oh, wow. No, look, I think again, this is probably just, what I tell myself 10 years ago as a young coach getting into it. I think having real deep purpose around what you're doing. It took me some success on the sports pitch and a couple of championships to realize that actually winning doesn't do it for me. We all want to win, and there's an element of satisfaction from that. But if everything you're doing is to win a championship, if you're like me, it will leave you a little bit empty and a little bit kind of, oh, geez, I thought it was going to be more than that. So I think having a real understanding of who you are as a person and what really truly matters is really important. And I think then the other part of it would just be to head coaches, especially, because that's who I'm dealing with now. It's the analogy that one of the head coaches gave me the other day was brilliant. I thought he loves surfing, and he loves surfing because he's part of a community of surfers. They go out. He might not get every wave himself, but he really enjoys that part of it. Being a head coach, he feels is he's out on the ocean on his own. If there's a shark, he's number one target. And I think head coaches now, that for me, there's massive strength now in getting people outside your organization. Someone who's not emotionally invested in what you're doing, someone who can really tell you the truth, who isn't worried about being fired as an assistant coach or whatever it is, someone to to question what you're doing, to soundboard off, to give you other ideas of ways of doing things. I would have been a far better coach with that, and I think now some of the best coaches I've seen have that person. And again, it just allows them to reflect quicker. It allows them to learn quicker. It allows them to consider other things. It allows them just to step off that hamster wheel and perhaps get outside their own head for a little bit. So that would probably be the advice that I'd give.
Well, I love that. And to me, if I'm talking to the listeners here, it's that same, applying that same logic to whatever it is you do, whether you're a business owner or a leader in your work, or just when you're in your family. We're all coaching it every minute. It's all about trying to get a better response from the people around us, whether we realize that's what we're doing or not. So yeah, being able to bring that approach to other aspects of your life and having that sounding board is going to improve your results, your level of fulfillment and enjoyment you get out of everything, right?
Yeah, I think so. Just having people that you can, there's a difference between mentors and someone you're working with. Mentors are hugely valuable because they get what you're going through and they can give you answers. But I think having someone who is not just a phone a friend, it's someone who's actually charged with guiding your progression. And when you do go off your track, just getting you back onto where you're going, keeping you accountable to getting better, keeping you accountable to developing the areas you need to, helping you identify the blind spots. I think it's, like you said, any area of your life, it's a competitive world out there. We all want to win in whatever we're doing. How can you best equip yourself to do that?
Yeah, it's a great way to finish. Will, thank you so much for coming on. Really, really fascinating chat. And yeah, we could have gone so much deeper on so many different areas, but to me, you've covered some of the really important aspects that the people listening can apply to their sport, they can apply to their everyday life. And yeah, I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and knowledge, expertise today.
Thank you, mate. Thank you for having me on. Like I said to you beforehand, I'm a really keen listener. I think you're offering a lot of value with your guests to a lot of people out there. So keep doing the good work, mate, and we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, appreciate that, mate. Absolutely. So many fantastic lessons there from Will on today's episode, particularly if you're a coach, but there are also a lot of things there that you can learn that are going to take you across all areas of your life. The lessons to add to your game plan. Build trust. So important when you want to create the best possible connections. The value of humility. And I also love that he shared a lot of the lessons that I've already taught you guys, how important it is to have that future vision really clear of where you're heading, just how much values can drive success, and then also the importance of having a purpose to everything you do. So some great lessons for you to apply there. And if you're looking for more of those things, that vision, getting clear on your values and purpose, then check out the game plan training. I also want to let you know that in the very near future, I'll have a new version of game plan specifically designed for parents and their young athletes to help you build that future vision together and be able to put the steps in place so that you can take that journey as a really strong team. You've taken the time to listen to this whole episode. Now it's time to take action. Commit to one thing you've learned today and make it happen. And to avoid any obstructions, join the Sporty Is Life movement by clicking on the link in the show notes.